What is going on, guys? It's been a while since I've been here, I'll tell you that. But I bought a camera recently, as you can see. The beautiful Panasonic Lumix G7. That's my microphone thing on top of it. Great deal I got on that microphone thing, by the way. But it took me a good while to decide on what camera to buy, and I thought I would just kind of walk you through my process, how I ended up with the G7, because it was not my first pick at all when I first started researching cameras. So I thought I'd kind of walk you through, and hopefully you can learn some lessons. Little disclaimer, this is not a camera buying guide. I'm not going to tell you what camera to buy. That's up to you, really. I think, it was Peter somebody, I don't remember his full name, another YouTuber said, you know, you need to do that research, you need to pick what camera to buy. But I'm going to walk you through some of the more popular options. I'm going to kind of walk you through my process, and hopefully you can learn some things from the mistakes I made. But aside from all that, let's get started. So, about a year ago, I decided I was going to buy a camera. I'd been making movies with this. This is the Samsung Galaxy S9. Not the top tier recording device. So after some thought, I was like, hey, I'm gonna start saving up to buy a camera. Now, as you can probably tell, I'm not quite of age to have a job yet, which much to my chagrin, you know. So I have very few outlets to make money. I have 3 outlets to make money. That is, I have my birthday, I have Christmas, and I have chores around the house. So, not the most extensive ways to make money. Now, my parents are very nice people. Love you, Mom and Dad. They helped me out a lot with this. They didn't directly contribute, but they doubled kind of my salary of what I usually work for chores. They were very generous with what they gave me for my birthday and Christmas. So, coming out of my birthday and Christmas, I had $300 saved up. So, I thought, okay, so I have this much money saved up. I'll set my budget to about $1,000, and I will obviously need to work a little bit. So, I start doing research. I spend way too long on research. Please. It's 2023, guys. Any camera you buy, unless it, you know, is a film camera. I've seen people on Discord saying, you know, like, film cameras, yeah, you can do a film camera. No, you can't. Don't, please. Anyway, none of that is relevant. So, continuing on. So I decided, hey, my budget is going to be $1,000. I started looking at a lot of camera lists, and as I looked, I decided there were a few things that I wanted out of my first camera. First, I wanted an articulating screen. I am a solo videographer, filmmaker, whatever. So I decided I want an articulating screen. This was my first mistake. Articulating screens, you know, great, but I just want you, hold on, I'm going to pull this up again. I want you to take a look at the size of that articulating screen. That is the average size of a camera screen today. So it's 3 inches wide, if you can't tell. I'm recording this on vertical, aren't I? But that is a 3-inch screen. So, when I am over here, and I look at that articulating screen, I can't see shit. So, articulating screen, great for something like this, where I am about, you know, hold on. Articulating screen is great for something like this, where I'm about 3 feet away from the camera, but it is not great for really any practical filmmaking. So, first off, you don't need an articulating screen. So that was my first mistake of something I wanted. The thing that I use the most, it's not the articulating screen. It is, I don't know if you've heard of it, but the Panasonic Image app. There's an app on your phone you can get where basically you connect your phone to the camera and you can see what the camera sees. It basically puts the camera screen on your phone. That has been invaluable. That has been ridiculously useful. I love it so much. So, if you can get a camera that has something like that, go for that over an articulating screen any day. So, this articulating screen wouldn't have been a huge problem. A lot of cameras have an articulating screen, but it ruled out 2 very specific series of cameras that I would have almost certainly gone with had I not wanted an articulating screen. And that is the Canon Rebel series and the Sony A5000, 6000, etc. series. So the Canon Rebel series, you know, as I say, it's the entry level, you know, this is what you go with as an entry level videographer. And that is most certainly, thinking back, what I would have done. I would have gone with the Canon Rebel series had I not wanted an articulating screen. But that goddamn articulating screen ruled that out. That's a problem. So just saying that now, you don't really need an articulating screen. Obviously, maybe you do, you know. Maybe this is what you do, where you have the camera 3 inches in front of your face, you want to see the person, you want to see what the camera sees, and that's good. But I wasn't doing that. I was doing filmmaking. So the second thing that I wanted out of a camera was autofocus. As I said, I'm a solo filmmaker. I wanted autofocus. I wanted my shots to be in focus. So I wanted autofocus. Now, this is, having gotten a camera, another problem. This is the Panasonic G7. If you don't know anything about the Panasonic line of G7, G85, GH4, GH5, etc., autofocus is dog shit. Bad. Unusable. So you can't use the autofocus. But that has not been a problem for me. I have learned to use manual focus, and it's good. Also, little disclaimer, people always like get hyped up about autofocus. Very, very few shots need focus pulls at all. Like, often, if I'm shooting a little sequence, I don't know if you saw it in the woods, I shot all that on manual focus. I set my aperture a little higher than you're supposed to, and I just went with that. I set my focus, and I walked into the focus, and I walked out of the focus as I walked toward and away from the camera. And I think it actually gave it a really good look. There's a couple people who have a video on how to nail focus without autofocus, and how to like solo filmmake without autofocus. I'll link a couple I might link a couple in the description if I'm not too lazy. But yeah, you really don't need autofocus if you're doing filmmaking. If you are doing vlogging, where you don't want to be concerned with focus, you're doing travel, you're whipping your camera around, then yeah, you do need autofocus. But for me, I don't need autofocus. So that is the second mistake that I made in my search for a camera. Oh yes, and the third thing I wanted was 4K video. 4K is good. Now, the reason I wanted 4K video was not because I wanted really high quality video. It was because I wanted to be able to crop in. So that's good. Honestly, I don't really think that was a mistake. I have utilized 4K cropping. The G7 has 4K. That's one of the main reasons I got it. But I've utilized 4K cropping. I've utilized that. So that's good. So yeah, 4K. If you want to do cropping, it's good. If you want 4K solely for the quality, and you think 4K is going to, you know, make your video cinematic or whatever, that's not good. You don't need 4K. But yeah, if you want 4K for the cropping, not a mistake. Okay, so another one of my must-haves was a microphone jack. This is a mistake. You don't need a microphone jack. It is my plan now to buy an external recorder. The G7 does have a microphone jack, so that's good. But I have found that it is better to record audio to my phone and then sync that up in post, just because of the flexibility. I'm not plugging in microphones to the camera and then having them really far away. You can only really use an on-camera mic doing that, which is bad for filmmaking anyway. So you don't need a microphone jack. Get an external recorder. Even something like the Zoom H1N has the same jack as most in-camera jacks. It's like I think it's like $66 right now. It's on sale. So yeah, I would get one of those. You don't need that in-camera microphone jack. Anyway, so so I was looking at camera review lists, and if you have been doing the same, you will have seen the Canon M50. This was my top choice for an extremely long time. You will notice it is only, I think, like about $800. Now, at this point, I will say I was looking at all new cameras. Everything was new, so I was looking at the new prices. I was looking solely on Amazon. So, Canon M50, top choice for a long time. It had autofocus, it had 4K, it had that articulating screen, it had in-body image stabilization. It looked like the perfect camera for me, but because I was bored, I kept looking, and I came across the Sony ZV-E10. And I switched my first pick from the Canon M50 to the ZV-E10. It seemed like the perfect camera. It had autofocus. It was better in low light. It had 4K. It had that headphone port. Seemed great. It had a better lens selection. I'm just looking at kind of the documents that I made back in the day. It had 120 frames per second. All good things, all good things. But it was $1,000. And at this point, I had made maybe $50 since, you know, that birthday, Christmas. So I was thinking, okay, ZV-E10, I guess now I'm going to have to start saving up, going to have to start grinding it out. And then I came across the Canon RP. I briefly debated the RP, which is a full-frame camera, so I'm really glad I didn't go for that. I don't need a full-frame camera. I'm very young. I'm just starting out. First camera doesn't need to be full-frame. If you're looking at a full-frame camera, don't go for it. I think the problems with a full-frame sensor are going to outweigh the pros of a full-frame sensor, so don't go with that. But then I replaced that Canon RP on my list with the Canon R10. People say Canon colors were good, so I was kind of leaning that way. It had more autofocus points, had that Canon dual pixel autofocus. It had 10-bit color. I wasn't really sure what that meant at the time, but it sounded good. Having purchased the Lumix G7, which is an 8-bit camera, that 10-bit color would have been nice. I'm saying that now. But, you know, at this point, I was under the impression that any DSLR camera would have RAW capability. If you don't know what RAW is, it is basically when the camera saves a ton of color data. I don't know if it works the same with video as it does with photo, considering I don't have a RAW camera. But I know with photo, like, it saves every ISO value. But yeah, if you are under that impression as well, that's not true. This camera has CineStyle. It doesn't even have log. Which I found is a bit of an issue. I like color grading. One of my favorite things to do in editing. But anyway, I put a bunch of like points. I kind of added them up, made a big pro-con list, and between the R10 and the ZV-E10, I decided on the ZV-E10 after all that. So I was like, alrighty, we got $300 to save up, let's go. And again, as I said, I was looking only at new pricing right now. So I was like, alrighty, let's go, we're gonna have to save up. A month goes by. I've made, you know, maybe $50. So I'm kind of getting a little iffy. I'm like, it's pretty expensive. $1,000 is a lot of money. It is around this time that I talked to my grandmother. She is not a professional photographer, but she does enjoy DSLR cameras. She uses those. And she said some things that really changed the way I thought about buying cameras, and I'm so glad I talked to her. So she mentioned, you know, you should look on the used market. Originally, I had avoided the used market. I didn't want to get something. I didn't want to pay a bunch of money for something that was just going to break. So I'd been looking at new, and I'd been looking at refurbished. But she said, go for the used market. You won't regret it. So I was like, okay, I'll go for the used market. And then she also said, get something sooner with less features. You're just starting out, you know, you don't need top-of-the-line features, and that really stuck with me. I am really glad I talked to her. Now that I had talked to her, I decided, okay, I should go for something cheaper. I should get something sooner rather than later, which I would highly recommend to everybody else out here. You don't need top-of-the-line features if you're just starting out. If you're a young filmmaker, young photographer, you don't need those top-of-the-line features. You don't need, you know, that top-of-the-line IBIS. You don't need, as I said, that top-of-the-line autofocus. I'm not saying gear doesn't matter. I'm not saying those features aren't helpful. Those features are extremely helpful. You know, I've had trouble getting stable shots with the G7. There's no IBIS. I've had trouble getting blurry background. I like that, you know, cinematic bokeh. But you don't need that when you're just starting out, because you're not trying to make millions of dollars off these films. As long as you know your limitations as you're watching it back, like, you can judge your film and say, okay, that shot could have used some bokeh, but I know I can't get that bokeh, you know? So you can appreciate your films and you can make films without those technical specifications if you know that the cinematography and what you're doing with it is great. So, that being said, I started looking again. I started looking at the lower end of the price range. This took me back to the Canon Rebel series, but I still really wanted that articulating screen. So I decided I wanted that articulating screen and I wanted that 4K. So I decided to go with the G7. There really wasn't a whole lot of competitors at this point, I don't believe. There probably was, but none of them really came close to the G7. I think I didn't go with the GH4 because it didn't have 4K. Would have been a good idea to go with the GH4 in hindsight. So I was really between the G7 and the G85, whether or not I wanted to save up and get that top-of-the-line IBIS that is in the G85. That's really the only perk in the G85. But I ended up going with the G7. I wanted something sooner rather than later. I found a really good deal on the G7. I got it for $400 on eBay, brand new with the kit lens. I love this camera. It has been extremely great. I'm sure there are better cameras out there, you know. I'm sure if I'd spent $100 more, I would have gotten a better camera. But considering this is my first camera, I think it's great. You might be thinking now, but the autofocus is terrible on the G7, you know? Why'd you go with it? Well, I figured, and this has been untrue moving forward, but I figured that because I had not experienced that top-of-the-line Canon autofocus, I figured that the G7's autofocus would be fine for me. I figured I wouldn't notice how bad it was because I hadn't experienced really good autofocus yet. That turned out to be untrue. It was, autofocus is terrible, as I said. You can't, it's really unusable. But I got used to using manual focus. It's been really good learning how to use manual focus. Thank you for watching. I hope this video has been helpful and kind of illuminated some of the mistakes I made in buying my first camera. But yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. You can subscribe to my channel. I do short films. I'm going to start doing a little bit more of this camera reviews, these kind of gear buying guide videos. But yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.